Business Radio is now available on Google Play Store and Apple App Store. Take us everywhere. Download the app for easy access to our informative content. Africa Business Radio. Towards a profitable Africa.
Towards a profitable Africa, and we hope that we can really see profits, but at the way things are going, profit is going to be something that we'll see in a very long space of time to come. And still in the wake of the VBS, which is the Vendor Building Society saga that we face as a country, we raise further questions around the role of regulatory bodies and institutions that are charged with ensuring that such things do not happen. And in the case of the VBS scandal, that happens to be the South African Reserve Bank, that happens to be National Treasury, and last but not least, that happens to be the South African Revenue Services. So we shall try in as much detail as possible in the compact time that we have with Mr. Justin Kettle to try and unpack all of this. So Justin, thank you so much for availing yourself to have this difficult conversation in the little time that we have.
Thanks, Mudau, and thank you for bringing me on the show again.
All right.
Hello to all your listeners.
Great stuff. Thank you, JK. JK, let's begin where all this starts. I mean, the South African Reserve Bank is the mother body that is, I guess, in charge of ensuring that all banks operate within a certain framework. The South African Revenue Services is supposed to monitor or at least see the illicit flow of funds, if they are functioning properly, into people's accounts, as well as National Treasury has got its own functions to perform in all of this. I mean, where did the shortcoming be? I mean, I know that it's quite a tough one to put to you, but where did they fail in all of this?
Well, I think, Nobani, from my perspective and what I've really read up around this matter is, I think fundamentally the failure here is really around timing. If you look at the history of VBS and the problems that they face, from around 2016, National Treasury became aware that they were accepting deposits. Municipalities were accepting deposits, and that was in direct contravention of the MFMA because VBS didn't hold a banking license to hold deposits. And ultimately, that type of communication should have been referred to all bodies within the banking environment, which is the Reserve Bank, National Treasury, SARS, and even FIC across the board. And these ideally are the parties that ensure that our banking system works. If these parties aren't including the correct controls within the environment, then we're all doomed to fail. I think typically you can see we've had banking crashes. African Bank comes to mind from upfront, and back in history we can look into Samba, etc. So we've had banking crashes purely because regulators haven't been as compliant and as sticky to compliance, resulting in these downfalls of these institutions.
I mean, the compliance as well as them performing their duties quite rigorously should have resulted in us picking this up. But in it happening at this point in time, as well as it now being the bank being put into curatorship, and seeing that the biggest losers happen to be the customers of the bank. As far as you know, I mean, what recourse do these customers have? I mean, there's billions that has been lost. I mean, in South African rands, it is 2 billion rand, and I shall do the conversion for our international listeners into how many US dollars this has now going to cost the general civilian population. What recourse do they have, if any, at this point in time?
Well, I think really it's going to be a tough one to play out, Mubani. You might remember that ultimately the biggest losers of VBS are you and me.
Yes.
It's our money that has been sitting, that municipalities put into VBS, that was effectively, now that you've heard from the Great Bank Heist report, being looted to certain individuals. So ultimately, the biggest losers at the moment are you and I. We must remember that the retail depositors have been protected to the tune of 100,000 rand per deposit.
Yes.
Which roughly, I believe, is around 92% of all of the customers of VBS anyway. So individual depositors more or less are protected by the liquidity held by the Reserve Bank and the guarantees that were put over those funds. So the broader scheme of things is that we obviously in an economy that is not flush with cash, and effectively lots of that money has been taken out of VBS Bank, which was for service delivery. That's the reality. I mean, some municipalities were sitting with around 235 million rand worth of deposits in VBS, and that's all gone. And the best that can really happen now is that Treasury is going to have to step in for those municipalities. That's the hard truth. Otherwise, those municipalities cannot operate. And then the other recourse is to look at how best they can get money from the curators and the liquidators, effectively, of VBS.
Their fate lies effectively in the hands of the curators and the liquidators. I mean, we know that it's just a report, the Great Bank Heist, as you put it, and we shall see what the criminal prosecution process is going to bring out of this, because as it is right now, everybody's saying, hey, I didn't put my hand in the kitty, but the reality is that people are suffering out down there on the ground.
Correct. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, criminal prosecution is just going to get a few people in jail. The reality is that from a civil perspective, we are all going to lose out from this. So I think there's going to be not much that's going to come from this process in terms of some of the bigger depositors trying to get their funds out. The people who are going to win is those people that probably took long-term loans and now won't be paying those loans back. Hopefully there's going to be processes in place to recoup some of that money. And obviously those people that have now been pointed out that have been rooted, ideally if it was criminal in nature, the best is that the asset forfeiture units would have to try and recover some of those funds. But if that money is gone, unfortunately, it's already in the system and we're not going to be able to recoup that.
This purely from, not so much from a professional perspective, but just to hear your view around this. I mean, there are some sentiments that are coming through in certain corners that if the African Bank was able to be assisted by the regulatory bank, which is the South African Reserve Bank, they can do the same for VBS. What's your take on that?
I think that none of us must ever believe that VBS should close. I think that besides anything else, if you just look at from a competitive point of view, we need more banks in South Africa. We need more financial inclusion, and we need more black banks. That's the reality of what we need in our economy. If anything, I think VBS has a customer base, so there is some value. So ideally, we would all want VBS to be saved and resurrected in a new form of a bank. I think, though, that there's stark differences between African Bank and VBS.
Yes, there is.
And I think that's really where the issue lies. The problem is that VBS will be a much more difficult salvation, effectively, than the likes of African Bank. But I think that for the sake of competition in our sector, the sake of a good story to tell, there's a need for the regulators to also put their cards on the table and see how best to find a solution in saving this bank.
I guess time will tell what's going to happen with all of this, and we shall watch it unpack and unfold, and if need be, we'll communicate again. Thank you so much for your time, JK.
Thank you, man.
Cheers, my brother. Bye.
Cheers. Good night. Bye.
All right, that was the views of Mr. Justin Kettle talking to us this evening around the role of the regulators in this whole VBS fall and what he thinks they could have done better. And we're also trying to understand what is it that is going to be with the plight of those who put their monies in, and that is the civilians who put their big deposits in. We understand that there's old people, young people, people who are saving in groups, and I really hope they get their money back, and I hope that this issue gets sorted, at least for the common man or the civilians on the street who have put their money in and all their life's worth of savings. We go to a break, and when we come back, we go to our last feature of the day, and we'll be talking to Mr. John Kamara, who is the ambassador for Ice Africa. You shall find out exactly what this is. A gaming event in Africa. He's going to tell us a bit more about that. We'll be back. Don't go anywhere. We'll talk to you after this.
You are listening to Africa Business Radio. For up-to-date insights on the African business landscape, log on to www.africabusinessradio.com. Your favorite shows are available as podcasts. Download them on our website and mobile app. Africa Business Radio. Towards a profitable Africa.